What's up, everybody? Today we are going over the plot point 15, the immediate reaction or consequences of the midpoint conflict. That's right. Everything your protagonist knew has been reversed because this is the step after the midpoint conflict. All right. Okay, maybe not all the things, but absolutely the lie they believed has been revealed. And now they're in the reversal of their reality. They're dealing with the immediate reaction or consequence of that reveal. And the reveal creates a new problem. And it's that problem that becomes the focus of PP 15, the immediate reaction or consequence of the midpoint conflict. It's also known as the reversal. But like all things, protagonists have to react to what has happened. And in this lesson, I'll go over how you can get your protagonist to react to the immediate aftermath of a midpoint conflict. But for context, PP15 forms the third and final plot point in Section 5, known as the Crisis of the New World, which covers the intense midpoint area of a narrative, roughly the middle of an Act 2, and the protagonist's central arc. So, what does that mean? Well, before we even get into it, remember that every section has a beginning, a middle, and end. So, plot point 15 is the final resolution plot point to section 5, which means whatever happened in the midpoint conflict, we have to resolve the middle conflict of your narrative before we move into section 6 and basically start the process over of beginning, middle, and end. Why? Because we got to resolve what just basically happened. With that said, remember to like and subscribe to the channel before or after you watch this video and you're like, you know what? I think I want to follow this guy. All right, let's get into it. The reversal. Remember, plot point 15 is indeed the reversal of the protagonist's central character arc. It's the direct, immediate aftermath and reaction to the midpoint conflict of the arc that occurred in PP14. Now, to be clear, you don't have to call it the protagonist's central character arc. Oh no, you can call it just the central conflict. I like to call it the protagonist central character arc because I look at plots and subplots as character arcs and sub arcs. It's basically the same thing, though. I just changed the name. That's how I like to look at it. This particular reversal focuses on how the protagonist and also supporting characters, if relevant, respond to and process the events and revelation of PP14. This includes the emotional, the physical, mental, or spiritual fallout from learning the truth of the lie. It could be one of those four, it could be two of those, it could be three of those, it could be all four. The point is, the midpoint conflict happens, and now they are dealing with that reversal. And by the way, this plot point can still maintain an active response to it. Okay, sort of like plot point 3 has a response to the inciting incident. This one can be a response. Even though we are processing and responding to the midpoint conflict, I do recommend that you do not allow them to pause and reflect on the long-term impacts of it. Why? Because that's how we're going to start off the next plot point in section what? Haha, 6. All right. Why is it important to understand that this is a response and process? Is because something happens, they learn new information, they're being overwhelmed by it. It is usually, if not always, the immediate reaction and or consequence. So it's not like the midpoint conflict happens and then 4 months later they're sitting there responding to it. No, usually you want to, if not always, the next chapter or chapters will be dealing with that sort of response, okay? Because it's like, oh, something happened, now we have to deal with it, okay? But why are they dealing with this emotional truth of the lie? Why must it include the emotional, physical, mental, or spiritual fallout from learning the truth of the lie? And well, first we have to understand what is the truth of the lie. Well, I go over that in the video before this in the playlist, but the short answer is that it's the core belief a protagonist has held that gets challenged or shattered at the midpoint. Please keep in mind that the protagonist isn't yet actively solving the new problem of learning this lie or the truth of the lie, or taking big forward steps to fix things, but they are indeed reacting and dealing with the consequences and grappling with the shift of this new truth. Now, for example, if you are in a romance and the midpoint conflict comes out and it turns out the person, the love interest, is not who they say they are. They're actually an international spy. Well, the fallout or the immediate reaction would be dealing with that information, not thinking of the long term response of it. But let's say the chapter is them. Doesn't matter if it's the guy or a girl, if it's a guy or a girl, the partner. Okay. So the main protagonist discovers, all right, they had this belief in truth that their protagonist was X, okay? And then the midpoint conflict happens, and they realize they are an international spy, and they're not even using their real name, okay? So the next chapter or chapters would explore the immediate reaction or consequence of that truth, meaning they're dealing with the stress of it. They're hiding in their office, or they run home, or they instantly try to get in touch with. You have to pick up the phone. Where are you? Where are you? I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you. So the next chapter is the emotional response to that. What's going on, right? Or them in a daze and walking through the street, like, what is going on? Is anything real? And then like everyone they're looking at is that somebody? Is that a spy? Can I trust that person? They don't believe or understand their environment, right? So it's it's an immediate emotional response to it, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, right? Let's go a different route. Let's say the midpoint conflict is more dramatic. All right, we're in a drama, or even let's say crime. So in the crime, the reverse is that the truth that they believe is that they understand the killer. They understand the crime being committed. They have all the pieces together, and they've been investigating this understanding of a truth they believe, which is technically a lie. In the midpoint conflict, they learn information that reframes the way they've been exploring this particular case. Let's say they now realize it goes deeper than they thought, and the police station and the government and a cabal is actually working in unison, in hybrid, right, to control the city. And originally, it was just a case about murders, right? They believed it was one person, killing somebody, and they were trying to map out or create a profile on one person. Then they realized, wait, this is a conspiracy. There's something bigger. So the direct response to that in plot point 15 would then be a chapter or chapters of them dealing with the immediate reaction or consequence of learning that information. By the way, that consequence could be that they find out what they found out and somebody's been tracking them, and now there's a chase. Now maybe they take them. They go, in the next chapter, it starts off with them, leaving a building or whatever, leaving wherever they found the information. And then they're being sought after, and they're like, and it's a big chase. And then finally they get taken, and they go, we're bringing you, you got to come with us. And they're thrown into a cell. Immediate consequence, right? Now, if you want it to be something smaller, maybe it's just a low town, a small town kind of story, and let's say it's a mechanic or whatever, and the mechanic is trying to develop their company and build their company. It's a small town, whatever the case is, and you know what? They finally spend a lot of money on putting in a new system. They're going to be able to work on foreign cars, because you need the computer for that, but beforehand they were working on older cars and tractors and stuff like that. But now they're like, oh, I finally got the equipment. We can work on, BMWs or whatever. Okay. So the lie they believe is that if I get this machinery, I will increase my business and we'll be fine. But they get their equipment, they install it, and the midpoint conflict reveals the truth of the lie, which is a, an industrial size shop is opening up. That's sort of like like a Walmart, but strictly for whatever, for mechanic stuff. And they have 12 mechanics working there, and the turnaround time for cars is like ridiculous. It's like really fast. So they're dealing with the immediate reaction or consequence. The immediate reaction might be they just spent all this money, and now they're dealing with that, and they're just like, what am I going to do? This is crazy, right? They're not necessarily thinking of like the long-term impact, but they're dealing with the emotional fallout of it. So maybe they get distraught, or they walk around, walk around the new facility of the other place. So they walk, and they're like, oh, this place is beautiful, like what am I going to do? This place is just I'm done. This is it, I'm done. So it's something like that. Like you always want them to have a response to it, but as long as the response is immediate and or shows a consequence, a fallout to what they just learned. All right. You don't want, as soon as you sit in what they can do to fix it, when they start thinking, oh, what could I do? How am I going to fix this? That's actually technically PP16. So PP15 sits in the emotional truth and the consequences and the reaction to that. All right. Sorry. Let's keep it going. How to approach the reversal. Things to keep in mind when you're working on the reversal beat of PP 15. Yeah, things to keep in mind when you're working on the reversal beat of PP15 is you can always use all of these complete, somewhat, or not at all mentality. Though, give the chapters within plot point 15 a chance to show some level each. In other words, let's say it this way, okay? Whatever happens in plot point 14, which is the midpoint conflict, PP 15 is where they're going to be put into an emotional situation where they will somewhat change, completely change, or not change at all and double down. So within the emotional truth of PP 15, the immediate reaction or consequence of the midpoint conflict, the characters' lie that they believe is being revealed a truth, and it creates the reversal, and the character is either going to somewhat believe the information they received, completely believe it, or not believe it at all. If they don't believe it at all, they double down, okay? And by the way, this could lead to an escaping danger. This could lead to them hiding. This could lead to them dealing with loss. This could be them dealing with a physical injury or a weakness or an emotional shock of something. It could be a spiritual revelation. Somebody praying and they're like, "Hey, please, keep my dog from, passing away." And then God, a divine being, an angel or whatever, when a plip plip shows up and it's like, I shall save your dog. The truth of the lie is, I was just hopeful my dog would live, but now there's divinity, and there's, you have to deal with that spiritual revelation. Whatever you choose, though, always maintain urgency and stakes. Raising them does help keep the tension high. You want to force characters to make choices, not just to move the narrative forward, but to see who they are. Remember, a character under pressure is an opportunity to reveal who they truly are, what they're capable of, and if they're even up for the larger journey ahead, or prepared to handle the second half of a narrative. And the final two things you should be thinking about is resolving section 5. Like I said at the beginning, you're basically tying up any new elements, context introduced in this crisis section of section 5 and pushing the narrative forward. Okay, what does this even mean though, Thomas? Well, I'll tell you. It means that you want any immediate threats, losses, or revelations to be resolved, at least in part, to keep the characters moving away from the situation. Unresolved threads can carry into section 6, but the direct, immediate response or consequence of it should be resolved enough where they can sit a moment in plot point 16 and think about what just happened and the potential long-term impacts of it. So keep that in mind. Pushing the narrative forward is important because you're trying to move from what we just experienced to the next section, which is ultimately trying to find a solution. We'll talk about that in the next video. What is the purpose of the reversal? Well, see, in short, PP15 turns the midpoint's big disruption into something personal and consequential. It prevents the narrative from rushing past the emotional core of the midpoint instead of using the reversal to lift the narrative. Okay, so basically, is it just something is happening, or are we having an emotional reaction to it? Okay, and if you're not a character-driven kind of story person, plot-wise, you still want the midpoint conflict to influence the characters. So even if it's not being driven by the characters themselves, and it's more about spectacle or explosions, there still needs to be an emotional consequence to it. There still needs to be physical, emotional, whatever. We have to see the characters being affected by it. It can't just be a huge explosion and the building blows up and then they push off the rocks and then they walk out and like, all right, what's the next task we have to do? Now, if it's a comedy, sure. My simple point is this. A narrative that blows past this plot point and directly into solving the problem is effectively ignoring the cause and effect of a narrative's movement. When things happen, there needs to be a reaction to it, both of the world and the character. A reaction isn't a beat that slows a narrative down, though it's possible to do so in the right circumstances, but ultimately, there's not room to breathe and sit with what happened, and it creates disruption in a way for the reader not to really sit with what's happening. Movement that is emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, etc. Movement that should be there to get the protagonist either away from what happened or get them dealing with the direct response of what has happened. For example, in the Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, the midpoint conflict in PP14 is where Mr. Gibb tells William about Barbossa leading a mutiny against Jack and ending up leaving it on the island. So now William's lie that he believed about Jack has been challenged. Does he believe it completely, somewhat, or not at all? Right? But they also reach the Isle de Morta, right? The Isle of the Dead. And Barbossa cuts Elizabeth's hand to learn she's not related to Bootstrap's Bill. The truth of the lie is revealed. He believed she was the cure, and it turns out, no, the curse isn't broken. Also, William betrays Jack by knocking him out and saves Elizabeth, so Jack believed he had the upper hand on William. So the lie is he believed he had the upper hand. The truth is he did not. Okay. If that's the midpoint, what's the immediate reaction or consequence of the midpoint conflict? Well, Pirates of the Caribbean, the Curse of the Black Pearl goes into PP15. Well, Barbossa's men search for Elizabeth and they find Jack. That's the immediate consequences of Jack being knocked out and waking up. And of course, Barbossa's men searching for Elizabeth. That's a consequence, okay? Jack calls for parley. That is an immediate reaction to that. However, William Turner, takes Swan to the HMS Interceptor and tells the crew Jack fell behind, so stick to the code and leave Jack there. All right, that is an emotional, an immediate reaction and consequence, okay? It's not a big explosion or death or some crazy stuff. It's just a direct response to a midpoint conflict. All right. Before we keep going and get into the right mindset perspective, remember you could always go to makearightlefthehere.com. That's right. You can check out all my books. I have books available from Death of the King, which is exclusively available on my Patreon. Feel free to check that out. 27 Plot Point Outline is available. I'm hearing from my producer. It is currently available, and we are doing very well with sales. So thank you very much to everyone who's been buying, supporting, celebrating, and pushing the book for me. Of course, this book is available, but the second book will be out this year. I'm looking for June or July. Let's see what happens. That's book 2, which is Finding Solutions with Talent. It is all part of a 5-book series. If you didn't know, this book will be available, if not already, by the time this video is out and about. This book, this is not the cover, by the way. This is just so I have artwork for, just so I could do this. This is the noir, the crime noir. This will be available on Patreon as well through the Scribe tier. It will only be the 0 drafts, but you will still get the educational element of it, and I'll be explaining the process. All right, getting into it. Let's keep it going. The right mindset perspective. PP15 is deceptively simple on the surface. You know, it's react, retreat, regroup, but it carries more than that. It is an enormous emotional response. Narratively, it's quite important. It's an impactful element. It closes out the crisis of the New World while simultaneously priming a protagonist for Section 6. I know the example came from film scenes. I know that Pirates is a film and not necessarily a book, but basically, if you look at it, those could be chapters in a book. But the point still stands. Approach your plot points with a cause and effect, whether it's romance, fantasy, or otherwise. Because remember, in Pirates, right, when Jack wakes up, that's his POV. That's his chapter. He wakes up. He's like, what's going on? Right? And then Barbossa's men find him. And he's like, parlay. And then he's brought over to Barbossa. And he goes, I will make a deal. I'll help you. I'll get you a hat. You could be an admiral. You'll have 2 ships. Then you could either do a hard chapter break, or you could just do a chapter, a new chapter. So 2 chapters in plot point 15. And we now go to Will, because he's going to have the most emotional impact in the scene when Swan tells him the truth. And while he's there, or well, they're like, hey, we got to leave Jack behind. You know, Jack can't be behind. Yeah. And they're like, oh, all right. Okay. And then Will goes downstairs, and then him and Elizabeth have a moment. That's a chapter. Even though it's a scene, it's a chapter. We get to feel that. So there's an example of making 2 chapters for plot point 15. All right. Now, the other thing you could do, technically, is you could show the boat chase, but that is, if we're being honest, the next section. All right. But if I may, romance might have them break up in the midpoint conflict, and one of the characters tries to stop the other from leaving. Please don't leave. A space opera, however, might have the Millennium Falcon exiting hyperspace to find Alderaan destroyed, and thus immediately captured in the Death Star tractor beam. So, the planet is destroyed, is the midpoint conflict. Wow, what's going on? There was a planet here. I thought we were going to... Han thought he was going to get money. Obi-Wan and Luke Skywalker thought they were going to go to the planet and get some help and be like, hey, we're going to save the princess. But the direct, immediate response is that they get sucked into... This is 15, plot point 15. They get sucked into the Death Star. My point is, it can be it could be the characters running for their lives. It can be. It could be a moment of like, ah! Or it could be a soft and quiet moment of reality hitting them. Okay? Give yourself the room and space to brainstorm, try things, and remember that nothing is written in stone. Unless, of course, you're actually writing in stone, then I would suggest stopping that or filming it, because I like to see it. My point is, PP15 is an opportunity to wrap up the midpoint debacle, the crisis of the New World, and ultimately move the characters into the next section, while also showing the direct and immediate reaction to what just been revealed in the truth of the lie. Anyway, next video in this series, we were talking about plot point 16. The protagonist reflects on the long-term impact of the midpoint conflict, or more importantly, the problem that is presented. And they're like, what do we do with this? Anyway, if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe and the bell icon so you don't miss out. I will say that thumbs up and sharing the video does help the algorithm. YouTube loves that for some reason. I guess that's the way they get us doing some yibby yabbing. But more importantly, remember, every Saturday and Sunday I do a live 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Saturday is educational real-time examples, and Sunday is the Write a Book with Me series from concept to completion. And we are on, I think, episode something. We're far. We're getting through. Also, by the way, if you want me to do a video specifically, something you need, let me know in the comments below, and I'll happily make a video randomly and just post it and publish it and do whatever I do with it. It won't be on a schedule. I'll just be like, hey, somebody asked for this. I did it. I put it up. It is what it is. All right. Other than that, we are out. That's it. Are we done? I guess we're done, right? Yeah. I'm Thomas J Bellezza, and as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time.